Hello and welcome to another video on the Riese Müller Delite GX Rolhoff. I've made several videos about my bike, but in this video I want to show you the maxed out configuration for the model that I have. I made a few upgrades since the last video that I wanted to mention before I stop making videos on this bike and start making videos on my next bike. So the first major upgrade that I did is the replacement of the rear shock. Now, even though the O2 Fusion R shock works just fine and I have no issues with it, that shock only had rebound settings and it didn't have any compression or lockout settings, and as a result I decided to purchase the Fox Factory DPS shock, which also comes on the Delite 25, and this shock has all the settings that I want, though personally I'm only concerned with the lockout settings, as those allow me control of how the bike behaves depending on how much load I have on the back of the bike. Installation of the shock was rather easy and it works perfectly, though I must confess I still find it very difficult to get the right amount of compression when I have a heavy load at the back of the bike. The next upgrade is the Pletcher R8e Mud Guards. So these mud guards are very heavy and expensive, and they do require a lot of DIY skills to actually install. They reduce the clearance between the tire and the frame even more, so that is one of the downsides, but the 80 millimeters are sufficient for covering the front 3.0 tire, if you have one, that is. As you can see, the rear mud guard right now is the only one that I have, because I have something special on the front that I will talk about in a moment. So the next upgrade is the NC17 battery covers for the bike batteries. So what I found is that batteries often get dirty, and quite often they get dirty underneath the battery, sort of on the underside, and as a result I decided to get some of these covers, which are, well, they're useful for protecting the batteries, also useful for protecting them against the cold in the extreme winters that we almost never have anymore. We don't have sort of below -20 colds, because what I've heard is that the batteries are supposed to become problematic at temperatures lower than -20 degrees Celsius, but we don't get those temperatures much. But you know, I got those covers just so that I can have them, and you know, I can probably wash them instead of cleaning the battery. Okay, so the next upgrade is the grips. So the grips that I went for are the Ergon Brooks leather grips, which I assume is some sort of collaboration between Ergon, which is a company known for making good grips, and Brooks, which are the makers of the legendary Brooks leather saddle. You'll also notice that the grips, just like other parts of my bike, are decorated with custom anodized titanium screws, and we actually use these screws in bicycle construction to sort of differentiate us from other custom bike shops. So I installed them on some of them on this particular bike. So on the back of the bike, you'll notice that I have some brand new Ortlieb bags. Each of these bags has 30 liters of volume and plenty of inner pockets, as well as outside straps and attachments to keep everything nice and secure. They are a perfect fit to the Riese Müller rack, but sadly they leave no space for the anti-scratch inserts, which means that my rack paint will end up getting scratched away eventually. Also, the wings of the rack that come with the bike are not particularly useful, since the bottom attachment of the Ortliebs expects a tube of some kind, not a flat plate. Also, what I found is that I had a laptop in one of these bags and it ended up making holes in the bottom of the bag because of the sharp corners. So unfortunately, these bags do not have any kind of bottom reinforcement, so it might make sense to put some cardboard or something similar at the bottom to prevent damage to the very bottom of the bag. Now, obviously, putting things with sharp corners into the bag is not the best idea. Right, let me mention some of the little extras that I have on the bike. So towards the rear, you can see two tiny LED lights that I use for additional safety. They are cheap lights from AliExpress. They charge via USB, and they basically let the cars know what the dimensions of my bike are. Now the Bush and Müller reflectors that came with the bike were not particularly good, and my bike even chewed up one of them inside the rear wheel, so I don't use them. I know some people use reflectors, put them on the spokes, but I'm not a big fan. Now on the handlebar, you can see that I now have a mobile phone holder, which I find really useful for checking messages and doing the sorts of things I'm not supposed to be doing while riding at high speeds. And you can also see the cheap $5 electronic bell, also from AliExpress. Now this bell is used primarily so that cars can hear me. The sound is extremely loud and extremely annoying and can probably damage your hearing when at close range or if you're in an enclosed space, for example. If you try it in a flat, it really hurts your ears. So I only use this with pedestrians when the normal bell, which is on the other side of my handlebars, doesn't seem to attract their attention. But nowadays, some people have their ears plugged with iPhones and whatnot. So this is really the option of last resort, I would say. I would only use it in an emergency or when people are just not hearing me. So now let's talk about the front wheel. This is a bit of an experiment. As you can see, given that I have a 27.5 plus fork, I have the option of putting in a 3.8 inch tire. So what I did is I went to a bike shop and I gave them a 110 millimeter boost front hub, which in my case was the SRAM X0 hub. And I also gave them an 80 millimeter 26 inch Sunringo Mulefoot rim. So they laced the wheel for me, and then I put a 26 by 3.8 Buntrager Hodag tire on it. And this tire, as you can see, it narrowly fits into the fork, affording about 3 or 4 millimeters of clearance on each side. There's plenty of clearance on the top though, which kind of suggests that you could instead put in a 27.5 by 3.8 tire and get away with it. I didn't want to change the bike geometry too much, so I went with a 26 inch. So what is the end result? Well, the combination of one of the best forks that's out there as well as a fat bike tire gives a double suspension effect, resulting in the maximum amount of comfort you can have on a bike. This includes both the handling of the obstacles, such as just rocks lying on the road, as well as the superior cornering experience because of the larger front tire surface area. Now, the biggest takeaway from this experiment is that I now find it completely reasonable to build fat bikes with a 3.8 inch tire on the front, targeting specifically this fork, which, by the way, might not be sold in the future as Fox seems to be moving away from 27.5 plus altogether. Of course, you do lose some of the width compared to the more commonplace 4.0 and 4.8 inch tires, but keep in mind that you can still have a 4.8 rear on a typical fat bike while having a truly awesome suspension on the front. Putting a 3.8 inch tire into a plus fork is not without its downsides. First of all, the amount of clearance on this Buntrager Hodag is about 4 millimeters each side. But there is a much nastier problem that you need to be aware of. You see, 110mm hubs were never designed to be attached to 80mm fat bike rims. That's what we have 130 and 150mm hubs for. So in this particular case, the spokes go too wide and they scratch the brake caliper. And as you can see, I've had to file away some of the paint from my XT brake caliper, which is not an ideal solution. Now, one solution to this problem is to use a larger rotor, such as a 203mm rotor, which, by the way, makes perfect sense because I feel that the 2-piston XT caliper on a 180mm rim, or rotor rather, isn't powerful enough to stop this very heavy wheel. Another option is to just use a more narrow rim. You don't really need 80mm in this particular case. You could get away with using, say, the 52mm ZTR Hugo rim, which would be sufficient for this purpose. Alright, so this is pretty much all that I wanted to say about the Riese Müller Delite GX Rolhoff. It's really as close as you can get to the holy grail of bikes, and the 2019 model, by the way, and I'm here reviewing the 2017, but the 2019 model, the forthcoming model, according to the pictures from Eurobike, is going to add the 3 things that we want most of all, which is the Rolhoff E14. That's the electronic shifting instead of the kind of mechanical shifting that I do on this bike. It's going to add ABS, obviously courtesy of Müller, and it's going to add finally the Gates carbon drive, supposedly by redesigning the rear bracket, but I don't really believe it. I look at the pictures and it's pretty much the same rear bracket as before, so maybe they just got some certification or something. Now, sadly, in the 2019 model, you don't get any improvements to the bike geometry, so the batteries are still hanging instead of using power tubes like the Riese Müller supercharger, and the tires remain pretty much the same width, which is fine, I suppose, but having fatter tires is way better, and I'm speaking from experience here. And also, there's been some smaller downgrades. For example, you no longer get the Supernova M99 Pro light. You now get one of the weaker lights, and the Supernova isn't even available as an upgrade. You have to ask your bike shop to basically install it for you, and it's still using the same Suntour Ion as the baseline fork, which is very sad. But, you know, this is an improvement still. You get all the innovations in the 2019 model, and I look forward to seeing it myself. And I'm not sure I'll buy it, but it should be fun just experiencing this bike. So that's it. That's pretty much all that I wanted to say about the Riese Müller Delite. And I'd like to thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more e-bike videos.